Great to be with you, all of you friends of Ingram Micro. I'd like to, over the course of the next 20-25 minutes, just walk you through a little bit of what we see as our vision in the future of cloud computing, and maybe end a few minutes on something not related to tech altogether, and hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration on culture and leadership, which I think is equally important as we build great organizations. My role as CEO of VMware, I've been with the company 4.5 years, spent most of my life at SAP, building several of their businesses there, and have seen much of this world of on-premise moving into the cloud, and we are at the cusp of something incredible. But we couldn't do it without you. Our partnership with Ingram Micro is solid. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Nimesh, for having us here. We're delighted to have a strong partnership with you. The business is growing in almost all the different regions. There's certainly things we can do better. But hopefully, through the course of my comments today, you'll get a glimpse of where every one of you who are friends and partners of ours at VMware can look at where we are seeing growth in our business. It's been a fabulous year for VMware. In fact, the last 2 or 3 years have been a renaissance. Our stock price has practically tripled. We're about a $55 billion market cap company, one of the fastest companies to get about $8 billion. We can see a path to 10. And hopefully we build a $20 billion company someday. And it all starts because of a fundamental perspective of disruptive innovation. And the fact of the matter is that technology now is becoming pervasive in every industry. The agricultural industry is at the core, a technology industry. Of course, medical and life science is fundamentally transformed through technology. You heard many of those use cases today. And the way in which you use mobility is transforming our lives. Financial services. You have to go to China and you notice every single aspect of payments is being done through WeChat and Alipay. And that's the norm today for a significant part of a generation that grew up with a mobile device, more common than potentially even a toothbrush. I don't know if that's good or bad, but nonetheless. That's the facts of the way in which we live today. And in that context, when you look at infrastructure, I spent a good part of my life in the applications world. I find myself in the last 4.5 years living in the infrastructure world. So I've seen both sides of the software stack. In infrastructure, there's sort of 3 priorities that IDC said are kind of the top priorities that IT folks are spending on today. Number 1 is security. It's a boardroom priority. If you are not focused on how cybersecurity is becoming a mandate, especially with WannaCry and Petya, and some of the key things that need to be done in a next generation of security, you're being left out. Number 2 are aspects of how the data center and infrastructure reinvents itself, because we are living in a world of hybrid cloud. The on-premise world is still growing. If you look at the server vendors, Dell, HP, they're all experiencing growth. But at the same time, you see the public cloud vendors, which I'll show you, they're also growing even faster. So this hybrid cloud world is very important. And certainly the way in which we work in mobility, mobile apps, and this has been kind of the key focus areas of VMware. Now, VMware, the story is actually pretty simple, okay? And I tell people I happen to be here in front of 1,000 odd of you, so I have to use PowerPoint. But I happen to hate PowerPoint because it's the worst way to tell a story. How many of you who have got kids here, you know, when you put them to bed, I love putting my 11-year-old and twin 8-year-olds to bed, and I tell them a bedtime story. How many of you whip up a PowerPoint when you do that? I mean, you'd be ridiculous parents. Now, I happen to use this chart because it's a nice way on a single slide of telling the VMware story. But every story has once upon a time. They lived happily ever after, has stuff in the middle. And this is, in essence, what we're trying to get done at VMware. We basically created this concept of a software-defined data center. Now, what's a data center? For those of you who are not in infrastructure, let me compare it to baking a cake. Okay, a cake has 3 elements: flour, eggs, sugar, maybe other ingredients, but at least those 3, and a layer of icing. A data center has 3 components: a compute, storage, networking, and a layer of management and automation. You basically do that in software. You save a lot of cost, you reduce complexity, and you make the planet a lot greener. That's what we've been doing. We invented that concept, and 500,000 customers, we've made that sort of a standard through this concept of virtualization. Now, as this moves to the cloud, you need the same way by which those workloads can easily move there in what's called a hybrid cloud. The top part of this diagram, in essence, is the world of desktops. 20 years ago, many of you came to a conference like this, you probably all pulled up your laptops. Windows was probably the most common operating system on a desktop. Today, the mobile device, whether it's phones or whether it's tablets, are more commonly the way in which people are experiencing, and it's not just Windows anymore. It's Apple, it's Google. So in that world also, as mobile moves edge, you need this kind of abstraction layer, and that's what VMware does. Covers this entire area of both the data center and the end user through a layer of security. That's our story, very simply. And we focused on 3 areas to make this one that you can build this as you think about your infrastructure. That's, if you sit in that bottom part of the diagram there, sits in private clouds today. And the private cloud world is moving in one of 2 directions. It's either moving to the public cloud or it's moving to the edge, okay? And many of the places, we have oil and gas companies that are building mini data centers, nano data centers as they called it, on an oil rig. Largely because it's really hard for them to do all of the compute and all that stuff back and forth to the public cloud because of latency. That's edge computing. At the same time, you see all of the success of AWS, and Bob Lord at IBM talked about IBM Cloud. That's a factor too. So this world of a hybrid encompasses both the core, the data center, moving to the edge and to the public cloud. The layer above that, in terms of how you build applications, moves from traditional applications to cloud-native applications in places like containers, where we're making big bets in areas like Kubernetes, to all of the SaaS applications. After me, my good friend Phil Wilmington from Workday will be talking about it. They're one of the leaders in the SaaS market in HR. And then the top layer of this is the device world, where whether you're working on a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, a phone, or inside a car, you want any application in any device. So as you think about this world, this is the way in which we want to make sure you're able to very easily and seamlessly move. Our focus at VMware has been to be an innovator, a disruptive innovation. Those of you who are fans of Clay Christensen from Harvard Business School, he wrote this book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And it talks about how systematically companies get disrupted because sort of this next garage startup builds something that takes down a whole industry. 20 years ago, this month is our 20-year anniversary, a husband and wife team, Diane Green and her husband, out of Stanford University, built this technology called server virtualization, from which VMware was born. And out exploded sort of a category that was disruptive to the server vendors. Initially, the hardware server vendors all fought them. Why would you need software server virtualization? Because it's in essence taking away from hardware. Then one by one, all of them embraced it. Okay? And we've seen the same thing now in terms of how the world of the data center, the world of security, storage, networking are all. And I'm going to play a little bit of that in the context of my keynote today, as those are very key components in the journey to the cloud. Now, as you look at the public cloud, most of my comments are focused on infrastructure as a service. The key aspects of these services, if you look at Amazon and Azure and Google and IBM, compute is the core component. That same notion of virtualization of a server, when played into the public cloud, is the fastest growth part. This is things like EC2 in Amazon. But you'll see that there are some other services here that are growing incredibly fast. For example, take a look at that database chart, that service database. And the database services now in almost all the public clouds are becoming places where customers are looking to do things in, quite frankly, very different ways than where the SQL database was started 30, 40 years ago. That's a key thing. The other thing to note is the way in which the public clouds themselves. This is just the market share at the end of last year in terms of the IaaS market as measured by this player. And you'll see here, Amazon's doing, of course, very well, top #1. But you'll see Microsoft, IBM, Google, Alibaba. And the good news with every one of these 5 clouds is they've got deep pockets. I don't see them going anywhere. And if you are partnering, you need to be partnering with all of them. And that's what VMware does. We're an arms provider to every one of the public clouds. We've got strong partnerships with Amazon. We've got strong partnerships with IBM and others with the other folks there that we'll be talking about over the course of time. And you'll see this is a key way in which you need to be building your future. Our services, as we've played them out with you, is to ensure that every one of these, whether it's the cloud infrastructure on-premise, or if you're looking at VMware Cloud and AWS, or a managed services provider, we've got a set of offerings, and now we've opened it up to the entire Ingram Micro marketplace to allow you to be able to take advantage of this as a set of key cloud services. So keep in contact with our team. There's a lot going on there. One of the key components of a cloud infrastructure is networking. And we are this week launching a whole new vision of our next generation cloud networking launch. It's happening both here and at Dell World. And the old networking approach of the past was very hardware defined. Okay? For those of you who know the network industry, and that has to change just the same way the server market 20 years ago moved from being hardware defined to software defined. We think the new approach that will be applicable for the next 20 years is one that's software defined, where it's flexible, it's programmable, okay, and built into this core aspect of the way in which apps and data can very easily intersect with that network fabric. We've been pioneering this with a product called NSX 5 years ago that's become one of the top growth areas of VMware. It's about a $1.4 billion run rate business, 4,500 customers, and it's revolutionizing the networking world. It's the foundation of what we believe the next platform of incredible growth will be, not just for us, but for every one of you who are in the networking industry. For example, if you're building a private cloud or tying it to the mobile desktop, as you'll see in a second, NSX is going to be very important to that future. It's one of the key reasons Amazon came to VMware and said, we want to build a preferred relationship with you in the hybrid cloud, because they saw the power of NSX. The new app frameworks, for example, Kubernetes, what we're doing with Pivotal Cloud Foundry, a core component of that is network security. And finally, what we're doing in the context of IoT, telco networks, SD-WAN are all premised on this notion of NSX going from not just the data center, but all the way to the branch. So very, very fundamental to our future. As we think about this, one of the things that's been fascinating for us, this is a Morgan Stanley CIO survey. We watch many of these surveys, and we ask ourselves, how do CIOs look at companies in the context of their future of networking? And typically I look at this and I expect to see VMware ranked number 3 or 4. In the last few quarterly surveys, we've been seeing VMware now ranking number 1 or number 2 in CIO's intent in future networking spend. And it's because the networking gurus of the world are seeing a shift of the world moving from a hardware-defined networking world to a software-defining networking world. I see many of you taking your cameras out to take a copy of this picture. You can feel free to tweet it out to the world. This is what we see is this is the way in which we view the future going to be a software-defined view. And that's certainly somewhat disruptive, but our goal is never to come into a company and say you've got to rip out your hardware. It's the same way that when you look at a Tesla, the value of a Tesla is you need the car, but it's the software that helps you drive faster, helps you drive better, helps you park a little better, and that's the fundamental premise. Now, if you look at this example, this is an example of NSX tied to mobile. I've got an iPad here, and I've got a balanced scorecard. That balanced scorecard is secured through per app VPN, a VPN capability on AirWatch, and it's talking to 4 different parts of the data center: finance, HR, so on and so forth. I've opened up my NSX control panel, and here I'm going to disable a part of the data center because I'm outside the firewall, a particular, or maybe I'm not allowed to see one portion of it. And you'll notice that some parts of that balanced scorecard now are not visible to me. That's what we call micro-segmentation. Now I go back to NSX. This is just like a light switch in software. I turn back on that part of the data center. Maybe I'm now the CEO, or I'm some senior executive in the company. I turn that back on, and I get back to the balanced scorecard. Hopefully we can get maybe it froze a little bit. All right, well, anyway, you get the idea. When you get back to the balanced scorecard, you will see that all of the aspects of that balanced scorecard is now visible. Okay? So here's the way in which we think that the future of networking connected to a mobile device can very, very simply and easily be secured. And the reason that's important is you think about your landscape. You've got applications in all different parts of the data center. You need to have them segmented so that certain users have access to certain types of apps and certain users don't have access to the other kinds of apps. Can we get back to my slides? All right, this is the reason we don't use PowerPoint. And I prefer to tell stories instead of PowerPoint. Now, that same advantage, okay, of what you saw there in terms of NSX segmentation can be played out in a branch. On the right side, you see here an NSX capability with software-defined WAN. And you see how quickly and easily that image refreshes. Something without that SD-WAN capability here, you see a lot more breakage in the video, not as smooth, not as effective. That's what we're trying to do, is connect the networking power in software to all of what you can see in the wonderful world of mobility. And being able to stretch this all the way from the data center to the edge and to a mobile device is something that we are uniquely provisioned to do. So as we think about this, I wanted to leave you with a few of those kind of key things that are very core. If I summarize what you've heard so far, the key aspect of that journey in the public cloud is the aspect of how you drive networking and the core aspect of networking. Now, in the remaining minutes that I have, I thought to switch gears. You've been listening to a lot of talk about cloud, a lot of talk about technology, okay? And I think actually, quite frankly, in my role, both at SAP and at VMware, and these are leading companies in applications and in infrastructure, I have found that the soft things are often the hard things in life. And the hard things are often the soft things in life. I remember when I was at business school at Harvard, I hated the organizational behavior class because I was like, man, that's kind of the soft stuff. The real aspect is finance and technology and strategy. And I find today, in my own leadership experience, that the hard aspect is creating and grooming and growing leaders. And how do you make this a repeatable phenomenon? So let me end a little bit on inspiration, because this is something that, to me, is something that will create a sustainable organization. Not just VMware, for all of you who are friends of Ingram Micro, as you think about this. And there's two fundamental principles that I will share that motivate certainly me and also us at VMware. I talked about VMware being premised on things like innovation and customer satisfaction. But there's two cultural aspects that have been key to our going. One is this notion of servant leadership. Imagine a typical organization chart that looks like this, okay? That's the top of the pyramid. You've got the CEO at the top. Okay, and you've got various different birds at different levels of the organization. And the poor bird that's looking at the bottom layer of that chart looks up, and what do they see? Okay, they see crap coming down, except it's another word. That's typically what most organizations look like today. Command and control, the person at the top drives everything. That works very well in an army. Now, what we think is you got to put this completely on its head. And the true aspect of a leader is when they're able to take that pyramid and flip it and say, listen, if I'm the C-level executive at VMware, if you are a field-facing person, facing a customer or a partner, my job is to serve you. Get every obstacle out of the way. Now, if you're not serving a customer partner, if you're just occupying a chair, okay, that might be a little harder for me to serve you. But nonetheless, if you are serving a customer partner, invert this on its head, and then every person starts to learn that mentality of servant leadership. Powerful when you do that, because often now you don't have the sense of, domination or dictatorial way in which things get run. You're thinking to actually build a much, much stronger fabric of fundamental servant leadership. I grew up in India. And many of you who are from India know that the freedom struggle through the 1920s and 30s and 40s that led to independence in 1947. This was a key aspect of one of the poets there, Rabindranath Tagore, is one of my heroes. He wrote, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. And I would submit to you, when you build a life where your attitude is one of giving back as opposed to taking, you're actually a happier person. Practice that inside your organization, and you'll find your organization gives back to you in ways that you can never imagine. Okay? The second principle that I would leave with you, one is servant leadership. The second principle is how you effectively team. And I would build on this notion. See, a lot of the races that we perform are ones we win individually. And there's a lot of individualism all the way from the sports arena to the business world. Okay, that's true. People win races individually, and there's an aspect of that individualism that shines. It's all about me. I get that. And some other races, most races are won as a team. That's true too. And in fact, I'd say that most of the races that we run in business are the ones that we win together as a team. But I'm here to tell you that some of the best races, certainly the ones that I've experienced, and the ones that I think you can experience, are the ones that you make a person better at what they do. And that's the spirit of partnership. I'd like to share with you, as I close, this 2-minute video. Some of you may have seen these. Two incredible brothers, the Brownlee brothers, and their race in just sweltering heat, a biathlon, a triathlon in Mexico. Let's roll this video of the Brownlee brothers and watch what they did together.
Johnny has to win and to be sure of taking the title. And right now he seems to have lost control of his legs. And this is worrying. Oh, and he's starting to slow. And there is a little way to go. There's half a K to go. And Johnny is running out of time and is losing. He's losing his sense of direction. This is worrying. Oh, goodness me. This is a horrible sight. Jonathan Brownlee has lost it now and has staggered to a stop at the side of the course, and Alistair's stopped to help him along. And Alistair is going to try and carry his brother home. Dramatic scenes in Cozumel as the Olympic champion carries his younger brother towards the podium.
Oh my God, I cannot believe what we are seeing here, Matt. Is this allowed? Is he allowed to help his brother? You know, is that part of the rules? I'm not too sure. We've never seen anything like this before.
The brothers are coming home arm in arm to finish in second and third, but Johnny can hardly stand. And Alistair is having to drag him across the line and pushing him home for second. Johnny finishes in second. Goodness me. What an incredible conclusion here in Cozumel. I've never seen anything like that anywhere in world sport.
Isn't that incredible? So that, my friends, is the spirit of partnership. We've certainly experienced that and seek to experience it with all of our partners. Ingram Micro, one of our key partners. And I would submit to you, every one of you, when you make someone better, it's actually a tremendous joy. And so as I close out here, hopefully some of those key messages that I talked about from the standpoint of our business, the cloud is a tremendous opportunity. We are your partner. We are here to help you achieve that every step of the way. We've experienced tremendous success in aspects like networking that I talked about today. That business is a significant part of our future, but we can't do it without your help. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great conference. Goodbye.